All right. So yeah, obviously selling online versus in person. And so just a little background, I've actually been doing this for a couple of years now, and I'm pretty good at Zoom. So I've gotten pretty aficionado of Zoom. I've tried all the different platforms, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But I've actually been doing selling online for a while, and I've also received coaching from what I call sales expert who does all of his sales online. So there's a mixture of both my experience and his in here as well. So, and I'll give credit to him here in a second. So just a quick normal, call it current normal acknowledgement. This is, definitely different times, and we're all having to do different things. Um, and so, one, just know that you're not alone. All the stresses and stuff that's going on right now, and this uncomfortable feeling that you're having is definitely not unusual. Everyone I've talked to in the last 3 weeks, uh, common themes. You are not alone. It's a chaotic environment. We all have a new, work at home environment for the most part, and this is new territory for everybody. But as Diane said, as a chamber, as a community, whatever, we're going to get through this together. So this is my home office, so you get an idea of what I'm looking at. So I literally look across the street at my neighbor's house. These are my two coworkers, Murphy and Mo. So they've been with me and are just out in the hallway right now, waiting to get in. So that's who I get to deal with every day. And some of you may have this situation where you've been at home with your kids and you're probably ready to drink heavily and tape your kids to the wall. So all that is normal. Lexi's closet right now, nobody cares. So just know that I'll call it there's a certain grace period right now with all this happening that perfection is not the goal. So effective communication and over communication probably is. So that's kind of where we're at. So a little tough love. So I'll call it, each of you probably are a business owner, et cetera. And this is one of the things in the context of selling online, irregardless of COVID-19, irregardless of anything else, the bottom line is you're still responsible. If you're the business owner, it's your business, good, bad, and the ugly. And there may be a lot of ugly right now. And that's okay. So just know that it's okay. But your job as the owner and a leader is to deal with the change you need to make and improvements. You may have to do things that are uncomfortable. You may have to change some of your beliefs that you're kind of have had up to this point. And when stress happens, just like it is right now, some of those beliefs get challenged. And so, just in the context of selling and selling online, may not make you comfortable, but it may be something you have to do. So that's what I'm here to help you do that. So, but in the bottom line is you're responsible. So don't forget that. So that's one of the things we bear as owners and leaders. So just a few factoids, I'll call them, just for give you some context. So 50% of all sales go to the salesperson who made the first contact with the prospect. So irregardless of whether it's online or in person, don't forget that statistic. So the bottom line is first in line for whatever your service is, and whatever you're offering, and it could be specifically to a specific offering, 50% goes to the person that reached out first. And so don't forget that. And so this is an example as well. It literally takes a dozen touches or more to actually make a sale. And so whether it's online, whether it's in person, it really doesn't matter. Those touches, those could be emails, those could be your web presence, those could be a phone call, those could be whatever. So on average, it literally will take a dozen touches or more to do that. And one of the things you'll see is the phone or video, as an example, is still the most effective tool. Strangely enough, it just is. So, but a whole lot of salespeople don't utilize that tool. So that's a sad statistic. And then if you're a sales manager, if you actually have a sales team, they don't actually train and develop their sales team. And so whether you're selling in person or whether you're selling online, whatever the mode is, if you're a sales manager, you need to be developing your team and helping support them and train them to do what you're doing. Throwing them out to the wolves, especially online, is a pretty daunting task. So just something to keep in mind. So selling online versus in person. So these are kind of the big five that we're going to cover today. One is just the pros and cons of virtual meetings. Second would be just preparation and knowing who your audience is, which is obviously a little different challenge online. some basic meat and potatoes, what I'll call it, on the equipment that I'd recommend that you need or want to have and worth investing in. We'll talk about what you're actually selling a little bit, and then we'll just talk about running effective meetings, and then there's one last subject we'll cover. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So the cons, what makes it tough to sell online? Obviously, you can't touch and shake hands, and you can't read body language as well. So just like we're looking right now, even with Zoom, as great as Zoom is, I'm moving my screen so I can see people, especially when you're presenting, everybody gets smaller, right? And so all of a sudden now what used to be maybe this big on your screen is this big. And so there's ways to kind of deal with that in multiple screens and things like that, but just know that, you know, that is one of the cons. The cons is you may not be able to read body language the way you used to by doing an in-person meeting. And so just know that that's going to be a challenge, and we'll talk about things to make that a little better for you or easier, okay? Reactions can be delayed or muted for obvious reasons, right? Your mute's on, I may ask a question, the video environment, I'll call it, or even a phone call environment may not lend itself to an immediate reaction versus you sitting across the table. So you as a moderator, including myself even on this call, have to kind of take that into account. So you kind of get in I'll call it your zone of your selling and you're pushing and you're talking, and you may not notice that somebody's sitting there flashing a big red sign, you know, on their screen. So just know that there is a reaction time that's delayed or muted, you know, even physically muted. So, and you hopefully have control of that like Lexi and I do. So conversations can be a little clunkier, I'll call it. It takes a lot of work for an online meeting, especially with multiple people. And I just literally finished one about 15 minutes ago with a business in Washington, D.C. It takes a lot of work on your part as the moderator or controller of the meeting to actually make that effective. And so know that that burden is on you. It's not on them. And so it's just going to take a little more proactive planning, a little proactive activity on your part. You're going to have to look at multiple screen things, right? You may have to look at the chat window. You may have to look at the video. So just kind of know that that's kind of the environment that you've got. And then last, there's what I call the trust gap, right? Everybody's concerned right now that how can someone trust me online? And the answer to that, we'll talk in a second. Just so know that people have that in their head, and I think there's some validity to it. However, with everybody in this current situation, everybody's in the same boat. So that actually dampens the difference a little bit compared to, say, 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago, where I had the ability to meet someone in person or do video chat. Now everybody's on Zoom, and so everybody's bar is kind of the same at the moment. So we can take advantage of that. Quick. So there we go. So I skipped right over it. So talking about the trust gap a little bit. So this is where the moment you have people online, just like I have you, the first thing that, and Lexi and Diane did this in an excellent way, right, is talk about what's currently happening. Normally in a physical environment, you have the ability to kind of do that, walking into a room, or you may sit in the lobby and chat with a receptionist and all these other things, right? But right now in this environment, all of a sudden everybody is sitting in front of you in the screen. So take a little bit of time whenever you start and literally kind of slow down. Don't be selling yet, right? Just literally empathize with your customer, your prospect, your client, whoever it is you're talking to. And especially currently, you know, what can I do to help you right now? And that may be, we need to make this 15 minutes and get off the phone because I've been on 8 Zoom calls today and I really don't want to be on another hour, right? So always kind of level set your audience a little bit. That helps close that trust gap, because if you're paying attention to their needs right off the bat, it immediately brings them a little more in the trust circle. And if they need toilet paper, that's what they need. So right now, that's kind of still a subject, strangely enough. So if that's what they need, figure out how to do that. So, and then second, and we'll talk about this in a little more detail a little bit later, but do you actually believe in what you're selling? And so I'll call it your own self-confidence, your own ability to convey what your product or service is and what makes it unique and why it is that it's important. If you don't have that honed, it makes online communication that much tougher in terms of filling that trust gap or eliminating that trust gap. If you really don't believe in what you're selling, trust me, it makes it really hard to convey that across a video screen. It just does. It's a little easier in person because you can kind of be there and touch and feel and all those kind of things. But once you're on video and people are kind of in an audience per se, and they're literally eyeballs on the screen, you better have that self-confidence to know what you're selling and why you're selling it. And that'll come through in your presentation, et cetera, what you're making. So just know that. So the pros is no travel, right? So the good part, and I've noticed this in the last 2 or 3 weeks, my car is literally sitting there. I think the tires may be flat because it hasn't gone anywhere. And so eliminating commute times, eliminating the coordination of travel, the cost of travel, I truly believe that this will reset the bar in terms of future activity in business. People will get used to this over the next few months, and then they will start questioning, why do you need to physically travel versus the opposite? And so the good part is that's a leveler for smaller businesses compared to a larger business. So if you're a small business and you've never, travel outside a particular zone is difficult, you can literally now reach a global audience, and it doesn't cost you a thing other than the physical tools we'll talk about, okay? It's actually easier together. So just like the people that are on this call, trying to physically get a group of 10 or 20 people together is a monumental task. Online, it's actually a little easier. You may have to have multiple meetings or multiple series or anything like that, but it's still actually easier to get people together here because they can do it on their mobile phone. I think there's one guy on a car, right? I mean, like it or not, that actually makes it easier to get an audience in one place because it's also concise and you're not dealing with travel times and all that stuff that goes around it. Just like Lexi's doing right now, you have the ability to record a call. And I would highly advise you do that almost on every call if it's a sales type environment. You can always go back to it. You can even share it with your customer or your prospect. Anything like that, it's a useful tool. It just is. So take advantage of it. You can transcribe things later off of those things. So you don't even have to take notes. You can have other things transcribe your notes afterwards, which is kind of cool. And then last, screen sharing focus. So just like the screen you're looking at right now, for the most part, if you're looking at my screen, I've got your attention on that screen. There's no other distractions at the moment other than maybe the dog in the background in your office at home. But from a focus standpoint in sales, you can keep it pretty tight, and their focus is what you're showing on the screen. So that's actually an advantage versus being in a big conference room or visiting some client somewhere that other distractions, phones are ringing, all those kind of things. So it's a little easier to actually stay focused. And so I'll stop there and take a breath. Any questions so far on anything like that? You can either unmute or put it in the chat, and we'll take a look. So any questions on so far on that, or comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
When you talk about being confident in what you're selling, do you see a pattern with the people who struggle the most with that, whether they are small businesses, if it's actually the business owner versus somebody they've hired? Any insight there?
Yes, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about it later in the pack, but yes, it's, I'd say, one of the number one challenges of any sales activity is people actually don't know what they're really selling. Especially, I'll call it just pick a product or service. That's lawn mowing or like lawn service. Are you really selling mowing grass? You're really not. You're actually selling saving that client time and their frustration of dealing with a lawnmower, and probably more time than anything. But so it's just a matter of really honing down what your value proposition is, which we will talk about here in a second. But I'd say that's in the top 3 to 5 of problems with sales, is you actually don't know what you're selling. You think you might, but you're selling your product or service, and you may be selling attributes versus actually the solution itself. Very, very common. And it doesn't matter whether it's online or not, but I will tell you that if it is online, it makes it that much more important to know what that is. You can kind of get away with some things in person that you can't just online. It's just a medium. So.
And Bob, one of the reasons, you know, you and I talked, and I think it's great importance that we get this webinar to a lot of individuals. You know, we have a majority of businesses here in Boone County that really don't have any sort of online presence. And
Yes.
so just working with them, you know, where do they start? You know, and a lot of times it may be a sole proprietor or someone with a very limited staff, you know.
Sure.
They really don't have the time or skill set for even social media presence or setting up an online store, you know, all of those. So, you know, we are just having those discussions. Now is the time.
Yes.
You know, it's kind of reactive. If they could have done that prior, it would be proactive. Sure. But most certainly, you know, this is the time. So I don't know if you're going to talk about, you know, that at all today. Kind of, you know, what are some key things that's imperative for them to do? Because I always tell them, if people don't know about you, they can't do business with you. So if they can't even get on and Google, you know, the services you provide, and you don't come up, you're not going to increase your, you know, business and your client base. And, you know, nonprofit organizations, likewise, you know, people need to know, not only so then they can contact you if they or anyone they know are in need of some support, but most certainly this is the time to connect with current donors, but potential donors also.
Yes, and we will talk about some other specifics, but, you know, just in general, I'll call it the answer to your question of what someone can do, even a solopreneur, if they've never kind of ventured into the online space. So whether that's web page, I call that collateral. It's just a matter of, one, honestly, what they can afford, and how much budget they have, I'll call it, to spend on things like that, because some things are quite expensive. The nice part is, I would say, you know, if someone has zero online presence or it has never been online or anything like that, they are going to have to spend some money. However, there are some extremely inexpensive tools and programs available, and just, I'll call it, it does take some maybe sweat equity, but there's no cheaper time to do some of those things right now. And while you'd want things to be perfect in the current world, the fact, if you didn't have a website as an example, you know, $15 and, you know, at Wix, and about a half an hour of your time, you'll at least have something, right? It's better than nothing. Now, if you're larger business, sometimes having a really bad website can be really bad. But for, you know, I've got software programs or apps as an example that can run an entire, you know, barbershop, plumbing business. They can do all their marketing, all their transactions, billing, credit card swipes, all in one app, right? And it's, you know, maybe $100 a month or something like that, right? It's so there's some really nice tools that are available that are really inexpensive. Even Zoom, like this right here, you know, it's still free. I think it's free even for beyond 45 minutes now. So if you had a 30-minute call every time, you'd never have to pay a dime for this. And so, to your point, if they're not using it now is the time, because you got a little bit of time to take to actually work on those things. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, if you have the funds or have the ability to squeeze out the funds, now is the time to do it, because you can really make some progress while the lull, if you want to call it that, if you have a lull in activity. So.
Hey, Bob, I've found that LinkedIn marketing with the right program is really effective. I handle strategic planning for a couple of non-radio clients. There's a tool called Connected.
Yes. Sure.
And it's $500 to set up, but you can get 60 connections a day for like dirt cheap, like $49 a month. It's really
yeah.
effective.
I've used that tool.
Yeah, it's not a sell when you get the message. It's just a soft. I think we have some things in common. I have a client out of St. Louis that got 60 meetings in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, and I also find that things like this, when you can see somebody, or if you have a cup of coffee, I know we're talking about online selling here, but once you get to that third conversation and it's online, there's a lot of emotional equity built into sitting down and breaking bread with somebody.
Agree. Even if it's online. Yep.
And you're exactly right
So
about
as example, right? Go ahead,
yeah.
sorry.
No, just up to 12 touches before you get the sale on a cold call.
Yeah. So I'll use it.
I also find it effective that you set an expectation for a meeting rather than just calling them out of the blue. Do some digital connections and say, hey, I'm going to be calling you Friday at 3:30. If there's a better time, please let me know. Things like that.
Yes.
I find a lot of traction that way.
And we'll talk about some of those things for sure. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's good. It's all good. No. Yeah. So literally right before this call, I had a call with a business in Washington, D.C., and it was through a LinkedIn connection request. Send some info. If it interests you, let's set a call. And I even put my Calendly link in there, which I'll talk about. So you can really automate some things. I'll call it to take the load off yourself. But yeah, for sure. But the flip side is now that once you have that meeting, now you got to get ready, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So for sure. Okay. So good lead in. Thank you, Kevin. I'll pay you later. Get this off the screen here. So this is once you actually have that call, and let's say you've set a call up with somebody on Zoom at 8 o'clock on Friday. So this is in terms of preparation. This is just like any other meeting. Know who your audience is before you arrive, right? If there's any way to know who's going to be on that Zoom call without a surprise, the better off you're going to be. So sometimes I call it bigger businesses as an example, you may set a meeting with one person and all of a sudden 12 people are on the call, right? So this is, to Kevin's point, do as much advanced research as you can, ask who you're talking to, who else will be in the room, or who else needs to be in the Zoom call, but know who that audience is. And this is where the advanced planning really comes into play. Asking ahead, asking for titles, who's going to be on the call from where. Time zones now become an issue if you're going beyond, Indiana. So I just had, Washington D.C. call, so we're on the same time zone. But so if you're talking to someone in Denver, Colorado, or Seattle, Washington, you might not want to set your call at 7 a.m. So there's all those kind of things you have to kind of now take into account depending on your audience. The good part is you may have a bigger audience than you've ever had before than you did previously. So take that as it goes. And obviously be prepared for anything. I call it the worst thing you could possibly do with an online meeting is just kind of show up. Just like, Lexi and myself, we were on 10, 15 minutes early just to make sure everything works. Because trust me, something always goes wrong somewhere. It just always does. The fact that, I always joke with people right now, that the fact that Zoom is still functioning to this level, given the load, I'm pretty impressed. I wish I'd have bought stock a month ago. So, and they're working out security issues and all those kind of things. So, so be prepared, be familiar with the tools you are using. So that could even be your mobile phone. There's a lot of stuff you can do on a mobile phone, right? There's apps on phones. You can do this on your mobile phone because a couple of people are on right now. You can even share things on the mobile phone. There's all kind, it's pretty amazing if your screen's big enough like mine, where at least it looks like a small TV, right? You can actually get a lot done. But know how all those things work before you're on a call, so you're not kind of clunky moving around and oops, sorry, and delay in time, because every time those things happen, you start losing people's attention. So just know that. One of the other things is information. I'll call it, this is an opportunity to get away from paper. Anything you have that is currently on paper, maybe you have a handout, maybe you have a flyer, maybe whatever it is, now is the time to digitize some of that stuff. Because now I can't hand you a piece of paper. I can't hand you a folder. I can't hand you a flyer. All the Boone County, chamber materials, can't touch it. How do I get to it, right? And so Some people are, even take a picture of it is better than nothing, but, digitizing things like that so that you can get to it and see it. I've started to do that even with some of my things, and I've put it on a Google Drive. And in fact, I won't go to it because I'll probably screw up the screen, but I've got a Google link. I can send you that Google link, and I'll actually will send this Google link after this call so that you can kind of see, it's public available information. It's in folders. You can access anything in there, etc. So taking advantage of that type of technology, again, doesn't cost much of anything, if anything at all. Agenda. So like Kevin said, literally, the good part, you've got people's attention for a half an hour, an hour, whatever it is. But literally you need to set the agenda. The difference, even you want to do that with an in-person meeting, but you can still get away without it if you didn't, but especially online, you really need to drive that agenda and ask if it's okay, if this is what we're going to do and this is what time frame we're going to do it in. Any suggestions, any changes? If not, let's go, right? So just do all that up front, do any changes you need to on the fly. But definitely online, have a goal of an outcome before you're done, right? And getting that agreement up front. So we're going to have this call, and what I'd like to do is go through this type of material, but when we're done, this is kind of what we both want out of it, right? So that can be stated clearly up front. It's best to do that at the beginning of the call. That way, if you do either run out of time or run out of runway, I'll call it, on the phone call itself or the Zoom call, you actually have something to come back to and say, okay, we need to, still have this outcome, okay? That could be a decision. It could be a preparation for an in-person meeting 2 months from now, once the thing lifts, whatever that is, whatever that outcome is. And then I'll call it, the host definitely needs to be early and ready and have your mobile phone pretty ready if you're doing one of these. If this whole thing went crazy, I still can call Lexi. I can still sort things out. You don't want to be unprepared in that case because stuff does happen. Zoom does go goofy sometimes. If you're using Zoom, other tools, like I think I tried a Microsoft Teams meeting last week with the Zionsville Chamber, and it just didn't work, right? So we had to reschedule on those kind of things. So stuff does happen. So, all right. Google Drive we talked about. Okay, hardware and software. So for this type of environment, okay, and I know there's some that may not do it this way, et cetera, but this is definitely just, some software things to think about and some hardware things to think about. Know your tool. Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams are the big four. I can tell you by using all of those over the course of time, Zoom is the most flexible and the most easy to use for other people coming to join your meeting. WebEx and GoToMeeting are a little clunkier. It's actually sometimes kind of hard for people to log in, which is not a good thing. And Microsoft Teams is kind of the same way. So Microsoft Teams is great for an internal team communicating, not necessarily this type of environment that we're in. I'd ask you to look at Loom. It's a Google Chrome add-on, and I think they actually have an actual app now that you can download, or other video snippet services like CoVideo. So in this environment, okay, you can actually add small video snippets to LinkedIn messages, to emails and things like that. It goes from being boring text to a little more personable with your face and something moving. And so it's just something to think about. Loom's free. CoVideo is 20 or 30 bucks a month, I think, but take a look at both of those tools. Document sharing and storage locations, like I just showed you on, a G Drive. You can take, even Microsoft documents and dump those into a G Drive, G Suite, Google Drive, and those become accessible. You can send people links and share that information, but literally costs nothing. So, but it takes time and a little bit of effort to set all that up. Meeting schedules. So I use Calendly. I think there's a few other programs that are relatively either free or inexpensive. If you want it branded, usually they charge you a little bit, but at the bottom of my email signature, you can hit my link and schedule a Zoom meeting with me, and I don't have to touch anything. So those I find are extremely useful. Some people like them, some people don't, but the ones that do, if you eliminate 3 steps to set up a discussion by just having somebody be able to hit a button, you've saved yourself a lot of time. So I'd highly encourage you to take a look at that. And then online payment as an example. So if you are in a service where today you would have to physically take a credit card or cash payment or a check, whatever you pivot to, and we'll talk about pivoting. But I mean, if you don't have the ability to take payment online, you need to figure out a way to do it. There's thousands of different ways to do that. QuickBooks does it. You know, you can buy, there's apps. You can go to Stripe and set up a landing page and a bunch of other things. But if you want payment, make it as easy as possible for people to pay you, right? The harder it is to get paid, the harder it is for you to make money. So the easier it is, and the more revenue you'll have. Hardware, so headset as an example, or a microphone, using your laptop's microphone, or if your laptop doesn't have a good webcam, I'd highly recommend you buy a webcam. Those may be hard to get right now, to be honest. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and a laptop computer and most webcams are 3 to 4 weeks lead time right now, because guess where they come from? You know, they come from China. So, so those have been pilfered a lot. But I use, in this case, I've got a webcam on my monitor, but I also have a backup webcam if that goes bad. The good part on a mobile phone is a lot of mobile phones, actually, their webcams are, obviously the cameras are really good. So, and you can buy little stands to put it in a fixed position, and they do a really good job. But I would recommend a headset, either hard line, in this case, mine's Bluetooth, but the Apple, as an example, the Apple earbuds that are connected actually sound really good on Zoom or a webcam or a WebEx. Try and, if you can, if everything can be hardwired, including your internet connection, the better off you're going to be. Wi-Fi is, can be unreliable, and your internet signal may be great, but if your Wi-Fi poops out, then Zoom starts falling apart. You can use speakers as well. Some people prefer to have 2 little speakers on their desk, just so you can hear, but it's really a personal choice. And then lighting. So as an example, so if you're, especially if you're trying to present to somebody, I've actually got a alternative light source here. So I'm going to actually reach around and I'll give you an idea what that does. So that's without it. I'm going to make it really bright, but blind myself, right? That's too much. So, but having an alternate light source is actually a really inexpensive way, and it actually eliminates a lot of shadows and some other things. So it's just something to think about. They don't cost very much. But especially in terms of your own room, if you're just in a room, do not sit in front of a window. If you sit in front of a window, the light comes in behind you and it really messes with your video presence. So just take that into account. Okay, so, and there'll be a question period after this, so I'm going to take a breath. So this is back to the original question of what am I selling? And so again, online, it's even more important to know this, right? And I know Kevin knows this stuff like the back of his hand, but you really have to understand, to convey what you're selling, you need to know what makes you unique. Not what your product is, that it's better quality or better service than somebody else, but what is it that makes you unique, and really honing what that is. And that takes some work. It's not as easy as it looks, but you want to get into that space that you see on the screen that says, okay, what do I do really well, and what do my customers really care about? And that customer caring about at the moment may be totally different right now than it was 3 months ago. And it's going to be different 3 months from now than it is today. And so this is where the work comes into play. But the more that you have the ability to describe what makes you unique and different, the easier it is to convey online. If you just say, I sell fresh dog food, I don't know. Okay, a lot of people sell fresh dog food, but especially in an online environment of selling, knowing exactly what makes you unique, it's made locally, I use local suppliers, it's all American made, and I deliver it to your door in 24 hours, right? Whatever it is that makes you unique, the more that you can tell people what that is, the easier online sales become. So, and then serve, don't sell. This is, especially now, this is Liston Wetherill. and I can give you his info if you look him up on LinkedIn. He is a preeminent trainer of online sales. His business is name, serve, don't sell, and he's just a wonderful resource to go to. But especially in times like this, people have a concern about selling in times like this. And obviously, if you're selling N95 masks, might be a good time to sell. But everybody else that's not, it's really about serving your client in whatever way you can. And that may be totally different than your current business model. And we're going to talk about the pivot here in a little bit. So just keep that in mind. And then back to the last, as you know, these are some of the real frustrations, and especially exacerbated by being online. So for instance, if you're trying to sell online and have a conversation and you don't have a website and what I call marketing or collateral or a presence, that is really difficult. People will do their research before the call. They're going to look you up on LinkedIn. They're going to look you up on Facebook. If you don't have those things at least cleaned, I'll call it, or cleaned up and orderly and simple and available, that's a problem. And so right now, this is the time to refresh all that. It doesn't really take that long to get your LinkedIn profile set up or cleaned up, simplified. Facebook, same thing, and a website. You need to have that presence, because especially if you're not physically touching people, they are doing their Google search on you. You're going to send them maybe your LinkedIn profile. What is it that says to them the moment that they open it? And it's so much even more important now that you're kind of gone digital. Always be qualifying. So, there's a thing called a sales funnel. So that's how basically all your prospects come into play into your world. And I'd highly recommend that you think through what I call a qualifying process, because you are online. And I don't know about Kevin, but as it was an example for me, my volume of calls to potential clients has gone up 3 to 4x. And so I've got to filter out people in that process. Otherwise, I'd be on the phone, 24 hours a day. So you've got to create a qualification process to kind of filter out people and prospects into a category that, are they a good fit for you? How do you get to know that they're a good fit as fast as possible? And then how do you know if they're a bad fit as fast as possible so that you can move them out of your funnel and move on to the next one? And so this is it's a root cause of sales frustration, is you have a lot of meetings and you may have a lot of phone calls and they result in nothing, because you may be talking to the wrong people because you're not qualifying. You're not trying to figure out, are they a good fit for my business? And back to no real unique value proposition. Do they actually align? Does that client or prospect fit what your unique value proposition is? The faster you can get to know and no fit, almost the better. So you can put better prospects into your pipeline and talk about your value prop. Not having a sales system at all. So this is where, especially online, you've got to keep track of who you're talking to, when you talk to them, what you said, what you presented. The moment you move past maybe 5 or 6 meetings, all that information, if you haven't documented it, will become really blurry really fast. You'll forget what you offered. You'll forget what price you told them. You'll forget what you said, all those kind of things. So you need to have a system, whether that's a CRM, customer relationship management system, or even a spreadsheet, anything, right? How do you document what you're doing? You may have had 3 phone calls today and I forgot the first one already, right? So you need to have that system. We've talked about selling versus solving, but this is really, focus on solving their problem on the phone, on this Zoom call, versus trying to sell your particular product. They're talking to you because they want a problem solved. Try and figure out what that problem is and what your solution is, not just you pushing and selling your product. And again, belief in your product, of your service. If you don't believe in it and your salespeople don't believe in it, really tough to sell, and really tough to sell online. It just makes it really, really hard. I'll stop talking for a second. Any questions on that? Comments? Clarifications? I know that was a lot. And obviously these slides will be available in Lexiel. be able to provide.
I just have a question. I don't know if you want to address this. I've had this conversation with some folks, and again, we have members that are for-profit and nonprofit. Being conscious of selling during these uncertain times. Whether it is a nonprofit or a for-profit, organization and businesses need to do business in order to stay, viable. But how are people pivoting during these times, due to limited finances of some individuals and organizations?
Yeah, so whether you're a profit or nonprofit, this maybe makes my nonprofit friends mad, but there really isn't any difference. If you're a nonprofit, you're still selling, right? You're selling to somebody. You may be selling to donors, but you're still selling. You still have a value proposition, all those kind of things, right? So in terms of pivoting, the pivot can be as simple as, I used to do that in person, now I've got to do it by Zoom. And that's a big deal for a lot of people, right? It may not make you comfortable, but if your sales process today for a nonprofit, we'll pick on them for the moment, is to literally go meet, big money donors, I'll call it, right? Whatever you want to call them. You got two choices. You can do nothing and wait for this to happen and lose 2 months or 3 months of your cycle, or you can be proactive and use an imperfect tool that makes you uncomfortable and still try and achieve the same thing, and use the advantages that you have in doing that. You may be able to reach a bigger audience that you would traditionally not get to by physically touching people, right? Or physically being with people. So if I'm an Indiana nonprofit, you may have a circle of influence that's kind of close to Lebanon, as an example, right? In Boone County. But, depending on what your nonprofit is, your audience of donors may have just got the whole United States, and you may have not kind of tapped or touched into that, but now you have the opportunity to do that. And it just takes you the effort and the ingenuity to figure out how to make that work. I'll talk about pivots in a little bit. And there are a couple different examples, and obviously depending on your business, it's vastly different, but Stories is an example. Yoga studios are going virtual online. You can, hop on Zoom and do yoga at home. It's a little hard to do hot yoga, apparently, I've been told. But things like that. So even beauticians, as an example, that can't cut hair, not that I have that problem, but some of them have pivoted into training. They may not generate revenue, but they're educating their customer. Or if you're a nonprofit, it may be the time to educate your donors. That sets them up for when they can donate money in the future. And so the pivot is vastly different for each type of business. Obviously, some business can still operate right now, but they still may have restrictions and how people are close to each other. I've had I think Domino's Pizza has gone to touchless service, right? And so their pivot is basically, we're going to keep delivering pizzas. We'll set them on your porch. You've prepaid with a credit card. You don't have to touch us at all, right? I went to Fun Days night before last, picked up, literally the door's locked. I call on the phone, standing on the sidewalk, place my order with a credit card. They come out and put it on a sack on the table, right? And so in their case, online is, they've got an online order system. And I know like Amore Pizza's done that. They've shifted really quick to an online ordering system, which I'm sure he didn't necessarily plan to do. But at least it's keeping him active and keeping pizzas going out the door. So I can order the pizza. It tells me what time to go to the parking lot, and I wait in the parking lot. I pull in, and it's there. So it may take an hour, but it's better than not getting a pizza. But every business is different, and that's there's some general things we'll talk about in terms of pivoting, but it's really hard because each business is so unique. But know that at some point, given current restrictions, and those restrictions may still bleed over into May, you never know, maybe even into June, depending on your business type, you're going to have to kind of learn to deal with this environment one way or the other. Okay, I'll keep trucking. So effective online meetings. So again, kind of pre-meeting, set your agenda ahead of time. Make sure, because you have their attention for a certain period of time and you want to take full advantage of that, but you also want to set an expectation. And then obviously provide them information of how to join the meeting. I know that sounds a little basic, but I've been on several here in the last few weeks where they forgot to put the Zoom link or they forgot to tell you how to actually join, because people may not be used to it, and that's okay, but make it as simple as possible. And this is why I do like Zoom. It is pretty much one link click and you're kind of there. So, and then what to do if problems do occur. So if I can't get in, what do I do? It's especially important, obviously, with group meetings, etc. So, you know, maybe it's call Lexi's cell phone number if it can't get in or whatever. Not for my meetings, Lexi, but yours. So, but and then in the meeting itself, obviously take a little bit of time for introductions and asking about their status, especially in current environment. Even if that's by the phone, I call it, you know, if you aren't burning up the phone right now to your current clients and your closest prospects, asking how they're doing, what you can do to help. And yes, I'll call it chit chat. I'll call it, you don't want it to be fake. In fact, you want it to be genuine right now. But, you know, my voice is about to give up this week just because I've talked so much in the last 3 weeks. So set the agenda we talked about, the meeting itself, and I'll call it, you know, just like I'm doing right now, I'm doing a lot of pushing, right? This is not what I would call a normal meeting that we would be having. So there's a lot of pushing, but when you're having a discussion with multiple people or even one person, you do want to take time to breathe, I'll call it, and slow down a little bit, because it is a different medium than sitting across from someone. And then when you're done, recap what happened, what actions you took, and then actually post-meeting, this is where I'll call it the online meeting can actually be a little more effective. You can put the link to the meeting in there, you can play the video again, you can do all kinds of things, and here's the notes from that. And I'll call it the documentation trail can be really an advantageous thing. And then biggest is if you actually agree to do something, just like an in-person meeting, you still need to do it, right? So same challenge. And then online tips, I'll call it just kind of general things. So be demonstrative on screen. So as an example, right, every once in a while you'll see me move my hands. And that's really, people respond to video in a different way than they do in person. You wouldn't do these kind of things in person more than likely, but online you want it to be a little more active. I think Diane had a moving background once as an example. So, I mean, there's just video is a different medium. And so you're going to have to, you physically, especially as an example, I'm pretty much an introvert. So I've actually got to be a little more demonstrative, and even lean into the camera. You know, looking into the camera is one of the challenges. So this is where engage directly. So as an example, I'll look over here at an example. So if I'm talking to you right now and looking over here, it's a little strange for you. For me, it's okay because I'm looking at myself. But if I turn around and I literally look at the green dot, and if you can really focus yourself when you're talking to look at that green dot on your webcam, it makes a huge, huge difference. And it's a learned thing, and I still even struggle with it. But, you know, you don't have physical eye contact, but on a video screen, you can still almost achieve the same thing, but it forces you to look at a green dot, not at your screen. And so just, you know, keep that in mind. Engaging directly with names. So if you have like this group right here, you know, if we were doing a normal, you know, sales meeting or anything like that, you may actually have to call on people by name, to get them to engage versus put something out there and wait. So it just kind of depends on the environment, but just ask for those inputs. So, and Diane and Alexi have done that and done a great job. Encourage each participant to have their video on. I know some of you don't, and I'm not here to shame you, but if you are selling, you definitely want your screen on, right? You know, I can put mine into no screen mode, right? I can put I've got a thing on there. I used to have my logo on it, but you know, so you really, you know, if you're selling, you want to be on the screen. You just want to be. So, and then all the same rules of professionalism and attire. You know, if you're in a sales call, if you're really there, you've got your customer right there, right? Lexi may have to move away from her closet, you know, et cetera, or whatever. You know, close the door, block it, you know, make sure the kids aren't running through. I mean, there's some grace going on right now because people are working from home and kids are at home. But in the end, if you're selling, do as much you can to control that environment, and don't show up in your jammies. I'll call it. That's not a good mode. So some webcam tips. I'm afraid to come out of here, but this is where I'll send this link out with the pack. But there's 1,000 different webcam types. What I would say is obviously get the best webcam you can for the money that you can afford. If all you can afford is $50, you can get a webcam for $50 if you don't have one. So, but the more you can, the higher end ones, you can control things. You can control your zoom, you can shift, you can move it, all kinds of fun stuff. So just keep that in mind as well. Any questions on that so far? And we'll finish up. So I'm 1 minute over. Okay, so back to pivot. So this is, I'll call it the survival and growth mode, right? So this is every business goes through this cycle. So startup, you go through a growth mode. You may go to what I'll call maturity, where you're actually just kind of generating cash or generating revenue, and then something happens, right? The chaos, you may have made a choice. There's a change that occurred. In this case, it's COVID-19. Everybody is in the same curve. And so today, as we speak, there's very few people that are not in that downward curve. There's a few that aren't. And if you're making a respirator right now, you're probably not in that downward curve. But I'd say 95% of everybody else is. So just realize that that is a normal curve of any business at any time. So the question becomes is how do you get back up that curve? And that's where the pivot is. And the bottom line truth is that you have to choose as a business owner to survive. You have to figure out there's nobody else that's going to do it for you. So you have to choose to be that survivor and pivot and do whatever it is you have to do. I've got business and clients that have totally changed total business, right? What they started with 3 months ago is not what they're doing right now. And they're going to do that for the next 3 months just to pay the bills and keep their people going if they have people. And figure out what does that beginning chapter look like. The good part of that, even though it's painful, is that you may introduce an entirely new service or a new method of talking to people just like this that you didn't have before that doesn't necessarily have to go away when this time stops. So all of a sudden now you get your local business back, but you also have a national audience, for instance, or have the ability to reach beyond borders that you didn't before. So don't just throw it all away once the good times come back, whenever those are. Learn from it and use that and use it to grow your business. And that's where we've talked about this before in a couple other calls. What assets do you have? What skills and talents do you and your team have? What relationships do you have? What specific knowledge and expertise do you have that you can use on that new curve, whatever that new curve is? And now geographic barriers kind of go away. So I know there's examples. So there's local people making, candy and food here that used to just sell locally. They've had to go online, and now all of a sudden they can sell that nationally and ship it nationally, right? UPS is still working. Postal Service is still working. So they've eliminated those barriers, and they've actually seen their sales increase, not decrease. So take a look at that inventory in your business, and even if it's for the next 3 months, you may have to do something totally different than you're doing today. But I want you to get in the mindset of survive, because the message basically is if you don't, you won't be around to be the guy that picks up when the recovery does happen, whatever that recovery looks like. And we want every single business in Boone County to recover. And so sometimes you got to do what you got to do to survive. So I think that's it. So I'll give this out. This is a couple of articles that were written after the 2008 downturn, and kind of how people pivoted, how businesses changed their business models, all those kind of things. And we'll provide this as part of the pack that Lexi sends out. So it is possible. And then 2 recommended resources, whether it's online sales or not, same side selling is a fantastic resource in a book. It's how to basically imagine it that you're trying to solve a puzzle with your client sitting next to them, not sitting across the table from them, in a simple summary. It's a great book. And then I'll call it one of my favorite books to give is just a Go Giver. It's a fable book, but it's a great book on selling. and how to maybe think about it in a different way. And that's me. So I'm going to take a breath now. Any other comments, questions, concerns, whatever, and then I'll turn it back over to Lexi.
Is this PowerPoint available in your Google Docs link?
It will be.
Good.
I think Lexi
I find, especially
will
now,
probably send it out too.
Since I'm the majority of what I do is broadcast consulting, there's been thousands and thousands of people furloughed in the broadcast industry. What I find in non-broadcast and broadcast is always have a relationship with one other person rather than your point person. That point person could go away and you don't have a relationship inside the building anymore. So whether
Correct.
That's a receptionist or somebody else, an operations manager or something like that, that just try to strike up a relationship with one other person in the business, just in case your main contact goes away.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Kevin. This I'll call it. If anything, this current situation does, it will make it really obvious where your weak spots were before. So if you didn't have a great customer management system of contacts and keeping those contacts and making sure you have those available, right now you're trying to call somebody, they're not there, right? You don't have their mobile number, you didn't record it, you didn't keep it from the last meeting. Okay, all those things that are happening right now that you may be frustrated by are just pointing out things that are weaknesses from your previous process. So that's a great example. Okay. Obviously, I'm available anytime. You've got my Calendly link down here. I'm on my website, all those kind of things. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. And anybody has any questions after this, please just reach out. Happy to talk.
Thanks, Bob. Does anybody else have any specific questions or challenges, that they want to just briefly share that you found this information usable or I've taken some notes with little asterisks. Aren't you excited, Lexi? Things that I know that, just as an organization, we need to be aware of. I know with my team and, Lexi's probably excited to hear that it really is that 12 touch, kind of the range, that a lot of times, and I'll just use the chamber as an organization, that's even reaching out to prospective new members. And it really does take those touches and the opportunity for people to really see what the mission of the chamber is and to understand that. And if the staff isn't aware of what that mission is, or our board, or even our members, they are the voice for us too. So I think all this information, is very relevant, whether it is a nonprofit. And I always say a nonprofit is a business. Nonprofit is just our tax status. And, we really are running that, nonprofit's tax status as a business. We are a business, and we're here, for businesses to connect them with resources. So we hope that this information was of great relevance. So before we close up, I just want to open that back up. If anybody has any just quick specific questions or ideas that they're going to input into their business, I encourage you to share those. I think we have so much when we can learn from each other.
I have enjoyed this meeting so much. I've taken so many notes, and I look forward to getting the attachment from Lexi. I guess I did have one question. When you were talking about the webcam, so we've all got them on our monitors, but I do have, I'm not really sure where it is right now, but one of the older, like freestanding webcams. Are those somehow or another better than the ones that come on all of our monitors now?
Depends on the age. I would just go ahead and plug it in and test it out and just see what it looks like to somebody else.
Okay.
Join a Zoom call with a friend and just kind of say, hey, I'm going to unplug this one and plug this one in and kind of see the differences, because the
Okay.
answer is it probably depends on your computer. It depends, in my case, I've got an Apple big monitor and its webcam's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the problem is I can't take that monitor with me. So, my laptop webcam is not as good as my Logitech webcam, as an example. So kind of depends on where you're at too.
That's amazing. I have enjoyed Zoom meetings probably the past 6 months, but I've never run my own Zoom meeting. So I'm sure I can just Google some things and get it figured out.
They have some great reasons. Zoom, just go to Zoom, their own website. They have some fantastic resources.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, it's not that difficult. It is if you've never done it, but in the end, it actually is fairly easy. Zoom's, to me, it's one of the easiest to operate from the back end. And Lexi's always available too. So.
Heck yeah, she's awesome. She's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, as far as backgrounds, where would I find out more? You mentioned briefly something about a moving background. What was that?
Yeah, there's in fact, I'll do one right now. So you can load virtual backgrounds. So I'll do one with my dogs here. So it's a little different depending on your background, right? And in Lexi's case, see how it kind of blurs around my bald head.
Yeah.
It can actually be distracting. So I call it, you can be a little careful with it. But the clearer your background, like if you have a total green, what they recommend is a green curtain, basically.
Okay.
Green, just like on TV. And those work well. But Diane had a moving beach. I thought that was awesome. So I think she probably uses a GIF, a GIF.
Actually, it was just on Zoom. So if you go to the little gear, like before you've logged on, I don't know how to do it from here. I think you have to do it before the meeting, I believe. Don't you, Shauna?
You can actually do it during the meeting. If you go to where it says stop video and click on the up arrow, it says choose virtual background.
Yeah, I've done that, but none of mine move in the background though. She had one that moved.
Yep, I'm gonna do mine. Okay, here. Beach. See? Now let's see.
Some of the preset ones are video.
Yep.
Oh, maybe I just haven't explored. Oh, I see it now. You're right. There we go.
Oops, but I'm not.
See, I learned something
At work.
That's
now
right.
I have to start my video. See?
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought that was nice.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
for an
We're
after
all
hours,
dreaming.
that's right.
I'm in Hawaii.
Hey, Bob, one other, what I would call at this point, old school resource is freeconferencecall.com, in case you don't have access to video.
Absolutely.
I've had an account for 12 years. I don't know how they make money, but you can do an old school conference call free.
Absolutely.
And we've done a couple of them with other boards that I'm involved with, because not everybody has this Zoom or
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Right, technical expertise. So,
Yep.
although Zoom is super easy.
And that's where, go to Google and type free, whatever you're looking for. Like they come with some strings attached sometimes, like, you get spammed forever on, advertisements, but free's free, right? Free. So yeah, for sure.
So Kelly, if you don't mind, sharing, some people might not know what business that you work with, but are you seeing a great influx of, I mean, you're having to do business virtually,
right,
in your sales and design work. So I know you probably have shared those designs digitally, but now you're, meeting folks 100%.
The way we've been running our business, I'm with A&K Monuments, and we build headstones, grave markers, civic memorials, paver fundraisers, and our doors are locked, but I do meet people outside, and I've been pretty much there. Now, I took the day off, which is why I'm luxurious and at home and having this meeting. But I've been doing mostly emailing with people, selling things online and over the phone, and just taking payment over the phone. And what I love though about this Zoom meeting is that when you're dealing with older people, they have typically middle-aged kids. Well, if I'm trying to connect with 3 or 4 people in their 40s, 50s, they live in different states, this is really going to help us connect so we can make a decision about the memorial for their parents. So
absolutely. Great example.
This is really, really going to be helpful. And then also just with people's schedules, everyone is really, really busy. So you take a very busy parent in their 30s that has had a parent die, and people die at all different ages. They've got kids, they've got sports, they've got everything. If I can do a Zoom meeting at 7 o'clock at night, I'd be glad to, you know, but I don't really want to stay at the shop until 7 o'clock. But this would be awesome for me to meet with people, maybe once they've come home, settled down. This is going to be really helpful.
And that's great. So this
example.
Connection to resources that you're already nowhere in that conversation. Did you say that you were just utilizing this during the stay-at-home order? You're seeing a platform that you can build your business going much beyond those restrictions.
And I love the whole premise of changing and growing and evolving, because those that don't eventually just fall away.
They do.
So I've always felt that the more we can learn and grow and just be hand in hand right with all the technology and advancements and all that is just going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I can tell you from personal experience, my parents lived in Fort Wayne. They've both passed away now, but just even that 2 hour back and oh my goodness, you know.
Yeah.
So
really.
if this had been available with my funeral home that we dealt with, and oh wow, that'd have been fantastic.
Right. Well, so, great. Like for instance, last week I was able to speak on the phone and email designs with a gentleman who he took upon himself to share the designs with his siblings. There was 6 of them. Yep. But with texting and email, it's not so difficult. But anyway, I was able to call the cemetery, find out every single thing that overwhelmed him, which is what we do. We make the whole process not overwhelming at all. And so basically all he had to do was approve the design, and we worked out everything with the cemetery, and they never had to leave their house.
That is an awesome story. I'm going to share that next week. So
great.
If you don't mind.
Oh, not at all.
That's a perfect pivot. I mean, this is, I call it, you know, you're making the best of what you have, but you're building a tool that you'll be able to use from here on out. And trust me, that situation is so common. You know, elder care lawyers, as an example, they're doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
And I think if you can see a face, for me, to see a face in a trying situation, you know, just like that, it kind of builds that trust. That, you know, sometimes it might be someone you know, haven't met before.
That's correct.
You know, because the kids, even if it's a funeral home from out, so, but any business, if you can have that face to face, I think it helps communication, you know, and then just that trust factor.
And that's where all those things that, you know, we talked about, the more professional it is, the more prepared you are, the easier it is. All your material that you just sent, you can put on a Google Drive and send them the link, and they can look at it. And, you know, the easier you make that, the easier it is, and the simpler it is. It's just, if it's clunky and it's hard, people get frustrated and they take a walk. So.
Right. Well, thank you,
Kelly. Since I have you on here, I was going to send you an email after this, but
awesome.
Lexi will email you the link to Wednesday's webinar that Hallie did.
Great.
I know you contacted me through Greenvelope to get that link. I think that'll be going out to all the members, but she'll personally send you an email today with that recording when she gets that uploaded.
Okay, great.
I actually did already get that one uploaded, so I will send you that basically just as soon as I get off here.
Awesome. Thanks, Lexi.
See, we're taking care of business. One thing done.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bob. I think it's just probably the 6 of us right now on here, but we appreciate, again, the time that you've dedicated to being a part of this webinar.
Happy to.
next, and Sean has done a webinar. You know, this is great that this is empowering our members to be able to make those connections with folks that they haven't been able to. I don't know if all of you had met Kelly before, so virtually you've been able to do that. Yeah,
and next time I'll try not to hide my face. I'm not really game ready yet. You know what I mean?
that's okay.
All right.
And we'll see. And Kevin has next Friday, I think.
Oh, sweet.
Right? Yes.
All right.
All right. Well, we'll hope
Yes, I do.
you guys have a good Easter, a good weekend, and hopefully you can all jump on next Wednesday. Chris is a great guy, and I think you'll gain some valuable information.
Thanks for the clap
Thank you
back,
all.
Bob. Great job. Have a
You're
great
welcome.
weekend.
Thank you.
You too. Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.